Champagne dripped from my face as 200 wedding guests watched in stunned silence. I'm Eddie Johnson, and my daughter's new husband just humiliated me at their reception. Preston poured expensive champagne over my head, told everyone I was just a pathetic janitor who didn't belong with real people. What he didn't know? I'd been secretly paying his medical school bills for 4 years. Every penny came from my dead wife's life insurance money. I stood there, champagne still dripping, and reached for my phone. One call would destroy everything he'd worked for. This is what happened when kindness met entitlement, and why you should never assume the quiet person in the corner doesn't have power. If this story intrigues you, hit subscribe. I'd love to know where you're watching from. And trust me, you won't believe how this ends. Because sometimes the person you underestimate the most is holding all the cards. The trouble started the moment I walked into Riverside Country Club. $15,000 they paid for this venue. I know because Sarah showed me the contract, worried about the cost. I told her not to worry, that her happiness was worth everything. What I didn't tell her was that $15,000 represented exactly 1 month of scholarship payments I'd been making to ensure her future husband became a doctor. The valet looked at my car, a 2018 Honda Civic with 140,000 miles, like I'd driven up in a garbage truck. "Sir, are you here for the Johnson-Hayes wedding?" His tone suggested I might be lost. "I'm the bride's father." His face went red. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Johnson. Right this way." Inside, the coat check girl held my jacket like it might contaminate her fingers. $29 at Target, and I was proud of it. Clean, pressed, appropriate. But next to the groomsmen's $3,000 Armani tuxedos, I might as well have worn overalls. Preston's father, Dr. Hayes Sr., approached with that practiced smile doctors use before delivering bad news. "Eddie, so glad you could make it." His handshake was firm, calculated to assert dominance. "You must be so proud. Medical school, residency at Johns Hopkins. Preston's really made something of himself." "He sure has," I said quietly. What Dr. Hayes didn't know was that I'd been watching Preston's progress through quarterly scholarship reports. GPA, 3.8, clinical performance, exemplary, character assessment pending. The groomsmen clustered nearby, comparing watches and talking about golf handicaps. One of them, a pharmaceutical sales rep named Bradley, stage whispered loud enough for me to hear, "Can you believe Sarah's dad is a janitor? At a children's hospital, no less. Preston must really love her." Another groomsman snorted, "Love doesn't pay for country club memberships." I felt my jaw tighten, but I stayed calm. Margaret always said you judge a man's character not by how he treats his equals, but by how he treats those he thinks are beneath him. Preston himself swept over, all smiles and charm in his Italian silk bow tie. At 28, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. Eddie, looking sharp. His eyes took in my target suit with barely concealed amusement. "Sarah's getting ready upstairs. She's nervous but excited." "She should be. Biggest day of her life." "Absolutely, though I have to ask." Preston's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Did you need help with a better suit? I mean, for the photos and everything. I could have my tailor." "This suit is fine, Preston." Of course. I just meant, well, image matters in medicine. People judge you before you even speak. First impressions and all that." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was a man whose entire medical education was funded by the very person he was subtly insulting. 4 years of tuition, books, housing, clinical fees. $320,847 in total assistance. Not that he knew. Sarah appeared at the top of the staircase in her grandmother's wedding dress, and for a moment, everyone fell silent. She looked exactly like Margaret on our wedding day 27 years ago. Same radiant smile, same way of lighting up a room. But as I watched Preston's face, I saw something that made my stomach turn. Pride, yes. Love, possibly. But also calculation. The way he positioned himself for photos. The practiced way he accepted congratulations from guests. Everything felt performative. "She's beautiful," I said. "The most beautiful woman in the room," Preston agreed. Then, lowering his voice, "And after tonight she'll be Mrs. Preston Hayes III. Part of a real medical family legacy." That's when I knew we might have a problem. The ceremony went off without a hitch, but the reception was where masks started slipping. I sat at table 12, the family table supposedly, though I noticed Dr. Hayes Sr. had positioned himself as far from me as possible while still maintaining the appearance of inclusion. Sarah had insisted I sit with family, not realizing that to Preston's relatives, I wasn't really family at all. During cocktail hour, I overheard Preston's aunt speaking to her husband near the bar. I still can't believe she's marrying him. Preston, I mean. Lovely girl, but her background... She gestured vaguely in my direction. Hospital janitor? What will people say at the club? Preston knows what he's doing, her husband replied. Pretty girl, and she'll be grateful. Those types always are. Those types. I gripped my champagne flute a little tighter. The truth was, I'd been watching this family for months, ever since Sarah announced the engagement. Old money, medical dynasty, the kind of people who donated wings to hospitals and expected their names on plaques. They saw charity as something you did for tax write-offs, not because you understood what it meant to struggle. But here's what really worried me. If I stayed silent tonight, if I let this pattern continue, what message was I sending Sarah? That it was acceptable for her husband to look down on her father? That love meant tolerating disrespect? More importantly, what would Margaret think? My wife died 5 years ago after a 3-month battle with lung cancer, stage 4 by the time they caught it. Preston Hayes was a second-year medical student then, doing his clinical rotations at Children's Hospital. He was one of the residents who treated Margaret during her final weeks. He was good to her, gentle, professional. He stayed late to answer my questions, helped me understand treatment options, held my hand when I cried in the hallway after her last chemotherapy session failed. That's why I did what I did with the insurance money. $400,000 from Margaret's life insurance policy. Her final gift to me, money meant to secure my future. Instead, I used it to create the Margaret Johnson Memorial Medical Excellence Fund, an anonymous scholarship program administered through City National Bank. Designed to help promising medical students complete their education, Preston Hayes was the fund's first and only recipient. I told myself I was honoring Margaret's memory by helping train the next generation of compassionate doctors. Preston had shown such kindness during her treatment, such dedication. I thought I was investing in character, not just education. But now, watching him work the room, accepting congratulations like he'd earned everything himself, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. Dad, you okay? Sarah appeared beside me, radiant in her grandmother's dress. You look worried. Just thinking about your mom. She would have loved this. Sarah's eyes misted. She would have loved Preston too. He's going to be a wonderful husband. I hoped she was right. But marriages built on unequal respect rarely lasted. If Preston truly believed I was beneath his family, how long before he started seeing Sarah the same way? How long before my daughter's worth became measured by her husband's standards? Sarah, honey, can I ask you something? Anything, Dad? Has Preston ever said anything about me? About my job? She hesitated just long enough to confirm my fears. Dad, Preston respects you. He knows how hard you work. That's not what I asked. He comes from a different world. Give him time. Time. How much time does a man need to show basic respect? 28 years wasn't enough? I thought about the briefcase in my car. Inside were documents that could change everything. Scholarship agreements, bank statements, Margaret's death certificate. Proof that the lowly janitor had been the silent benefactor behind Preston's entire medical career. But using that information would mean revealing the secret I'd kept for 4 years. It would mean admitting that every dollar in Preston's education account came from the life insurance payout of a woman he'd helped care for. It would mean showing Sarah that her father wasn't the simple working man everyone assumed. Was I ready for that conversation? More importantly, was I prepared to watch my daughter marry someone who fundamentally disrespected the man who'd made his career possible? The band struck up the first dance, and I watched Preston lead Sarah onto the floor. They moved together beautifully, lost in each other's eyes. For a moment, I almost convinced myself I was overreacting. Then Preston's best man grabbed the microphone for his speech. Ladies and gentlemen, I've known Preston since Harvard Medical School, and I can honestly say he's everything you'd want in a doctor. Brilliant, dedicated, and most importantly, he knows quality when he sees it. He gestured toward Sarah. Sarah Johnson is lucky to be joining the Hayes family legacy. Not Sarah Johnson Hayes, not a partnership. Sarah was lucky to join them. That's when I realized silence wasn't protecting anyone anymore. The best man's speech ended with polite clapping, but I caught the subtle emphasis on certain words. Sarah was lucky to join their family. Preston was elevating her station. Classic rich family language disguised as compliments. Dr. Hayes Sr. approached our table during the salad course, wine glass in hand and confidence radiating from every gesture. Eddie, I wanted to thank you personally. Thank me for what? For raising such a wonderful daughter. Sarah's going to fit right into our family. He paused, swirling his wine. Of course, there will be adjustments. Medical families have certain expectations, social obligations, but I'm sure she'll adapt beautifully. She doesn't need to adapt to anything. She's perfect as she is. Dr. Hayes smiled that practiced smile again. Naturally. I just meant the lifestyle differences. Country club memberships, medical association events, charity galas. It's a different world from what she's used to. Different from what I'm used to, you mean? Well, yes. Your background is more practical, which has its own value, of course. I set down my fork carefully. What kind of value would that be, Doctor? Hard work, dedication, the backbone of America. His tone was the verbal equivalent of patting me on the head. Preston and Sarah are lucky to have that grounding influence. Translation, I was useful as long as I stayed in my lane. Preston appeared beside his father, loosening his bow tie slightly. The champagne was clearly having an effect. His cheeks were flushed, his movements a bit looser than before. Dad, what are you two talking about? Just getting to know my new co-father-in-law, Dr. Hayes said smoothly. Eddie was telling me about his work at the hospital. Right, the maintenance job. Preston's smile was perfectly pleasant and completely condescending. That's actually how we met, Sarah and I. She was visiting someone in pediatrics, and Eddie was... What were you doing that day? Mopping. Cleaning the nurse's station. See? Hard-working, salt of the earth. Preston clapped me on the shoulder like I was a golden retriever. We need people like you, Eddie. Society can't function without folks willing to do the jobs others won't. The jobs others won't. I felt something shift inside my chest. A familiar anger, but colder now. More focused. Preston, can I ask you something? Shoot. How did you pay for medical school? The question seemed to catch him off guard. Scholarships, mostly? Merit-based? Why? Which scholarships? The Hayes Excellence Scholarship, primarily. Family Foundation stuff. Academic Achievement Awards. He waved his hand dismissively. Boring financial details. Must have been substantial. Medical school's expensive. $320,000, give or take. Preston's chest puffed slightly with pride. But when you've got the grades and the family connections, doors open. Family connections. I almost laughed. Dr. Hayes rejoined the conversation, apparently sensing tension. Preston's always been brilliant. Youngest in his class. Highest MCAT scores. The scholarship committee recognized natural talent. What scholarship committee? I asked quietly. City National Bank manages the fund, Preston said. Anonymous donor, apparently. Someone who believes in investing in future doctors. Anonymous. Rich people like their tax write-offs private, Dr. Hayes added with a knowing chuckle. Probably some pharmaceutical company looking for good PR. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. City National Bank app, already logged in. Account balance visible. $198,247.83 remaining in the Margaret Johnson Memorial Fund. Interesting, I said, showing Preston the screen. What do you think this account is for? Preston squinted at the phone, champagne making his focus sluggish. Margaret Johnson Memorial Fund. Probably another scholarship program. Common name, Johnson. Very common, I agreed. Wait. Preston's expression shifted slightly. Johnson. That's Sarah's maiden name. It is. And your wife was... Margaret Johnson. She died 5 years ago. The color drained from Preston's face as the implications hit him. Dr. Hayes leaned in, trying to see the phone screen. I don't understand, Preston said slowly. The scholarship that paid for your education? The anonymous donor? I kept my voice perfectly level. That was my wife's life insurance money. Silence. Complete, absolute silence at our table. Preston stared at the phone screen, then at me, then back at the screen. That's impossible. Is it? You're a janitor. I clean floors at Children's Hospital. Same hospital where you did your residency. Same hospital where you treated my wife during her final months. Dr. Hayes grabbed Preston's arm. Son, what is he talking about? I remember her, Preston whispered. Margaret Johnson. Room 314. Lung cancer. Stage 4. You were very kind to her. And to me. Preston's hands started shaking slightly. But the scholarship, you don't have that kind of money. $400,000 in life insurance. Every penny went into that fund. Why? The word came out strangled. Because you were good to her. Because I thought you understood what it meant to care for people who were suffering. I stood up slowly, phone still in hand. Around us, other guests continued their conversations, oblivious to the earthquake happening at table 12. You called my work jobs others won't do, Preston. But I chose that job. I chose it because cleaning those floors meant being close to the doctors and nurses who tried to save my wife, because it meant contributing something, even if it was just keeping their workspace clean. Preston was staring at me now with something approaching horror. And I chose to fund your education because I believed the man who held my hand in that hospital corridor would become the kind of doctor who never forgot where compassion comes from. I picked up my champagne glass. Cheap sparkling wine, not the Dom Perignon they'd served the Hayes family table. Seems I was wrong about a lot of things. Preston sat frozen, staring at my phone screen like it contained nuclear launch codes. Dr. Hayes kept glancing between us, trying to process what he'd just heard. There has to be some mistake, Dr. Hayes said finally. The scholarship committee told us the donor was a pharmaceutical company. The committee was instructed to protect donor anonymity, I replied calmly. Standard practice for memorial funds. I could see Preston's mind racing, trying to reconcile his assumptions with reality. His father-in-law, the man he'd been subtly insulting all evening, had personally funded his entire medical career. Sarah approached our table, sensing the tension. Is everything okay here? You all look like someone died. The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. We're fine, sweetheart, I said. Just discussing Preston's scholarship program. Oh, the Hayes Excellence thing? Dad, isn't it amazing how these programs help deserving students? Sarah's smile was radiant, completely unaware of the bomb that had just exploded at her wedding reception. Deserving, I repeated quietly. Dr. Hayes cleared his throat, apparently deciding damage control was necessary. Eddie, I think there might be some confusion here. Medical education funding is complex. Multiple sources, various foundations. No confusion, doctor. I have all the documentation in my car. Documentation? Bank records, scholarship agreements, transfer authorizations. I paused, letting that sink in. Margaret's death certificate. Preston's champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor. The sound drew attention from nearby tables, guests turning to look at our little drama. Careful there, son, Dr. Hayes said, his voice tight with forced cheer. Nervous Groom syndrome. A server appeared immediately to clean up the glass, and I noticed something interesting. As she knelt to gather the pieces, both Preston and his father stepped back automatically, as if her presence might contaminate them. The same reaction they'd had to me. Thank you, I said to the server. That was very kind. She looked up, surprised. Most guests didn't acknowledge service staff. Just doing my job, sir. Important work, keeping everyone safe. Preston watched this exchange with growing discomfort. He was starting to see the parallels. Hospital Administrator Janet Miller chose that moment to approach our table. I'd worked with Janet for 15 years, and she'd always treated me with genuine respect. Eddie, I didn't know you'd be here tonight. She gave me a warm hug. How's retirement treating you? Preston's head snapped up. Retirement? Eddie didn't tell you? After 15 years as head of facilities management, he's finally taking some time for himself. Janet beamed at me proudly. Best facilities director we ever had. The man could run that hospital blindfolded. Facilities director? Dr. Hayes sounded confused. Oh, yes. Eddie managed a staff of 43, oversaw a $2 million maintenance budget, implemented the new waste management protocols that saved the hospital $600,000 annually. Janet paused, noticing the strange looks around the table. I'm sorry. Did I say something wrong? No, I said quietly. They just assumed I was a janitor. The truth was more complicated. I had started as a night janitor 15 years ago, working my way up through determination and competence. But somewhere along the way, people stopped seeing the progression. They saw a man in work clothes and made assumptions. Even Preston, who'd worked in that hospital for 2 years, had never bothered to learn my actual title. Well, Janet continued, retirement suits you. Though we miss having someone who actually cared about the place. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. Between you and me, the new guy couldn't organize a 2-car parade. After Janet left, our table fell into uncomfortable silence. Preston stared at his hands, processing the revelation that his assumptions about my capabilities had been as wrong as his assumptions about my financial situation. Facilities director, Dr. Hayes murmured. $2 million budget. Still just hospital work, I said evenly. Still the kind of job you think is beneath your family. Preston finally looked up, his face pale. Eddie, I didn't mean... What didn't you mean, Preston? I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't ask. You saw what you wanted to see. Sarah was looking confused now, sensing undercurrents she couldn't identify. What's going on here? Why does everyone look so serious? I checked my watch. 7:30 p.m. The evening was still young. Just getting to know each other better, sweetheart. The DJ announced it was time for the father-daughter dance, and Sarah's face lit up with pure joy. She grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the dance floor as the opening notes of My Girl began to play, the same song Margaret and I had danced to at our own wedding. As we swayed together, I could feel the weight of 200 pairs of eyes watching us. Sarah looked radiant, completely happy, unaware that her new husband had spent the evening systematically insulting the man who'd made his career possible. "Dad, this is perfect," she whispered. "Mom would have loved this song. She would have loved seeing you this happy." Preston makes me happy. I know he seems a little formal tonight, but wedding stress, you know? He's actually really sweet when it's just us. I hope that was true. I hope the man I'd observed tonight was an aberration, brought out by family pressure and alcohol. But Margaret had always said, when people show you who they are, believe them. The song ended, and tradition dictated that Preston cut in for the next dance. As I stepped back, he moved forward with that practiced smile. "Mind if I steal her back? She's all yours." But as I started to leave the dance floor, Preston caught my arm. "Eddie, wait, about our conversation earlier. Not here, Preston. This is Sarah's moment. I just want to clear the air. I think there's been some misunderstanding." Sarah looked between us, confused. What misunderstanding? Other guests had gathered around the dance floor's edge, watching the newlyweds with champagne glasses raised. Preston's groomsmen clustered nearby, along with both sets of parents and various relatives. A perfect audience. "Preston, please," I said quietly. "Let's talk later." "No, I think this needs to be addressed now." Preston's voice carried that slight slur of someone who'd been drinking steadily for 3 hours. "There seems to be some confusion about my scholarship funding." My blood ran cold. He was going to do this here in front of everyone. "Preston," I warned. "Eddie claims he funded my medical education through some memorial scholarship." Preston's voice got louder, drawing more attention, which is obviously impossible. Sarah's face went white. "What are you talking about?" Dr. Hayes stepped forward, clearly sensing disaster. "Son, maybe we should—" "No, Dad, this is important." Preston turned to address the gathered crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to clear up a misunderstanding. My father-in-law has been telling people he paid for my medical school, which is frankly ridiculous." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sarah looked mortified. "Preston, stop," she pleaded. "I earned my scholarship through academic merit, not charity from a janitor." The word came out like a slur. "I appreciate Eddie's contributions to society, but let's be realistic about who belongs where." The crowd was dead silent now. Even the band had stopped playing. I felt something break inside me. Not snap. That would have been violent. This was more like ice finally giving way under too much pressure. "Preston," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent room, "you should stop talking now." "Why? Because the truth is uncomfortable?" Preston was fully committed now, his inhibitions dissolved by alcohol and adrenaline. "Look, Eddie, I respect what you do. Society needs people willing to clean up after others, but don't pretend you're something you're not." He grabbed a fresh champagne flute from a passing server's tray. Dom Perignon, the expensive stuff reserved for toasts. "This is Dom Perignon 2014, he announced to the crowd. $280 a bottle. This reception cost more than most people make in a month. The Hayes family has been supporting medical education for 3 generations. He held the glass high, champagne bubbling golden in the ballroom lights. "So let's be honest about who really belongs at this level of society." That's when he did it. Preston Hayes III, Harvard-educated doctor, devoted son-in-law, poured an entire glass of $280 champagne over my head. The liquid was cold, shocking, running down my face and soaking into my $29 Target suit. 200 wedding guests stood in absolute silence, watching champagne drip from my nose onto the polished marble floor. "You don't belong here," Preston said clearly, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. "You never did." Sarah made a sound like she'd been physically struck. Several guests gasped audibly. Dr. Hayes looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. I stood there, champagne dripping, feeling the weight of every stare in the room. Some faces showed shock, others embarrassment, a few showed the cruel satisfaction of witnessing someone else's humiliation. But I didn't move, didn't react, didn't give Preston or his family the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. Instead, I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen was slightly wet, but functional. "Preston," I said quietly, my voice somehow carrying despite the whisper-level volume. "You mentioned my scholarship claim was impossible. Completely ridiculous." I held up the phone, showing the City National Bank app. Account balance clearly visible, $198,247.83. Margaret Johnson Memorial Medical Excellence Fund, managed by City National Bank. Established May 15, 2019, with a $400,000 initial deposit from Colonial Life Insurance Company. Preston's confident smile started to waver. Scholarship recipient Preston Hayes III. Total disbursements to date, $320,847. The crowd pressed closer, trying to see the phone screen. Someone near the back called out, "What's he showing?" I touched another app icon. A PDF document opened. Official scholarship paperwork with City National letterhead. Scholarship terms: renewable annually based on academic performance and character assessment. Revocable at sole discretion of fund administrator. Preston's face had gone from flushed to gray. Fund administrator, I continued, reading from the document, Edward James Johnson. That's me, Preston. The silence was so complete I could hear the ice melting in abandoned drinks. The janitor you just humiliated? The man who doesn't belong here? I wiped champagne from my cheek with the back of my hand. I've been paying your bills for 4 years. Dr. Hayes made a strangled noise. Sarah was crying openly now, mascara running down her cheeks. Every tuition payment, every book fee, every clinical rotation cost. $320,847 of my wife's life insurance money. I looked around the circle of shocked faces. My wife, Margaret, who died of lung cancer in room 314 at Children's Hospital. The same hospital where Preston did his residency. The same woman he held my hand and cried with me when she died. Preston was swaying slightly, the full horror of his situation finally penetrating his alcohol-clouded brain. So you're right, Preston. Let's be honest about who belongs where. I reached for my briefcase. The click of my briefcase opening echoed through the silent ballroom like a gunshot. 200 guests leaned forward as I pulled out a manila folder. My movements deliberate and unhurried despite the champagne still dripping from my hair. These are the original scholarship documents, I said, holding up the first set of papers. Signed and notarized on May 15, 2019, 3 days after I received Margaret's life insurance payout. Dr. Hayes stepped forward, his medical composure finally cracking. Let me see those. I handed him the documents. His hands shook as he read, his face growing paler with each line. This can't be right, he muttered. The scholarship committee told us. The committee was instructed to maintain donor anonymity, I replied calmly. Standard protocol for memorial funds. You never asked who the donor was, Doctor. You just assumed it was someone worthy of your respect. Preston grabbed the papers from his father, scanning them frantically. But the Hayes Excellence Scholarship. Was the cover name you gave it? The actual fund is called the Margaret Johnson Memorial Medical Excellence Fund. Your scholarship checks came from my wife's death benefit. Sarah's sobs were the only sound in the room as Preston read his own scholarship agreement. His signature was there, clear as day, along with the terms he'd apparently never bothered to fully understand. I pulled out a second folder. These are the bank statements. 4 years of transfers from my account to yours, Preston. Would you like me to read the amounts? No, Preston whispered. September 2020, $47,200. Tuition and fees for your final year of medical school. I could hear guests murmuring behind me, the sound of 200 people doing math in their heads. January 2021, $18,400, clinical rotation fees and medical equipment. Preston's best man looked like he was going to be sick. June 2021, $53,900, first-year residency supplemental funding because hospital salaries don't cover medical school loans. I held up a third folder. Preston, do you remember signing this document? He took it with trembling hands. It was a character assessment form required annually for scholarship renewal. Question 12, I said. How has this scholarship impacted your understanding of service to others? Your answer was quite eloquent. Preston's voice was barely audible as he read his own words aloud. This scholarship has taught me that medicine is about serving all people, regardless of their background or social status. I am humbled by the anonymous donor's generosity and committed to honoring their sacrifice through compassionate care." The irony hung in the air like smoke. Janet Miller pushed through the crowd, having heard the commotion. When she saw the papers in Preston's hands, her expression shifted to recognition. "Oh my God," she said. "Eddie, you're the anonymous donor? The Margaret Johnson Fund?" All eyes turned to her. "I've been processing scholarship payments for 4 years through the hospital's education department. We never knew who—" She looked around the circle of stunned faces. "This fund has helped 8 medical students complete their education. Preston wasn't the only one." 8 students. I'd never told anyone that detail. "The hospital board considers the Margaret Johnson Fund one of our most important educational partnerships," Janet continued. "The donor requirements are incredibly specific. Recipients must demonstrate not just academic excellence, but genuine compassion for patients regardless of their socioeconomic status." She looked directly at Preston. "There's actually a character clause. If a recipient demonstrates behavior inconsistent with the fund's values, support can be terminated immediately." Dr. Hayes grabbed my arm, his composure completely shattered. "Eddie, please, there's been a misunderstanding. Preston doesn't normally—" "Doesn't normally what? Show his true character?" I pulled out my phone again, this time opening my call log. "I have the direct number for Marcus Thompson, the scholarship administrator at City National Bank. Would you like me to call him?" "What would you tell him?" Preston asked, his voice hollow. "That the recipient just demonstrated a fundamental lack of character by publicly humiliating his benefactor at a family gathering." The crowd pressed closer. Someone in the back was recording with their phone. "Eddie, you can't be serious," Dr. Hayes pleaded. "Preston's residency, his career. His career was built on my wife's death benefit, money we saved for our retirement, which became scholarship funding when cancer took her from me." I opened another app on my phone, the bank's loan management system. Preston's student loan account appeared on screen, showing his current balance. $320,847 in deferred payments, I read aloud. "Deferred because of scholarship coverage. If that coverage ends, the full amount becomes immediately payable." Preston's knees buckled slightly. "Immediately?" "Standard loan terms, Preston. You signed that agreement too." Sarah finally found her voice through her tears. "Dad, please." "Don't do this here." "Sweetheart, I didn't choose the time or place. Your husband did that when he decided to pour champagne on my head." Dr. Hayes was frantically trying to process the financial implications. $320,000, due immediately, plus accrued interest, plus penalty fees for early termination. I consulted my phone again. Current total obligation, $343,200. The number hit the crowd like a physical blow. Several guests gasped audibly. Preston's pharmaceutical rep friend pushed forward. "Eddie, be reasonable. Preston made a mistake, but ending his career over one bad moment." "One bad moment?" I looked around the circle of faces. This wasn't a momentary lapse. This was character revealing itself under pressure. I pulled out the final folder, the one I'd hoped never to use. Margaret's medical records from Children's Hospital. 3 months of treatment, 74 days total. Guess which medical resident was assigned to her case during weeks 6 through 12? Preston's face went completely white. Room 314, oncology wing. You held her hand during chemotherapy. You explained her treatment options. You cried with me in the hallway when Dr. Martinez told us there was nothing more they could do. My voice remained steady, but I could feel the emotion underneath. You were kind to her, Preston. Professional. Compassionate. That's why I established this scholarship, because I believed the man who comforted a dying woman and her grieving husband understood what medicine was really about. I held up Margaret's death certificate, dated March 15th, 2019. She died on a Tuesday, liver failure, secondary to cancer. Her last words were about how grateful she was for the care she'd received, how proud she was of the young doctors who'd treated her with such Retriesque continued dignity. The ballroom was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning humming overhead. 3 months later, I took her life insurance money meant to secure my future, and created a scholarship program, because I wanted to honor her memory by helping train more doctors like the one who'd been so kind to us. Preston was crying now, mascara-streaked tears mixing with champagne residue on his cheeks. Eddie, I remember her. She was so brave. She was, and she believed in you. I closed the final folder and placed it back in my briefcase. But the man who poured champagne on his benefactor's head? The man who told 200 people that I don't belong in civilized society? That's not the Dr. Margaret thought she was helping to train. Dr. Hayes made one last desperate attempt. Eddie, please, think about Sarah. Think about their future together. I looked at my daughter, beautiful and heartbroken in her grandmother's wedding dress. I am thinking about Sarah. I'm thinking about what kind of marriage she'll have with a man who fundamentally disrespects her family. I pulled out my phone one final time and opened my contacts list. Marcus Thompson, City National Bank, was right there. Preston, you have exactly 60 seconds to decide how this ends. Preston stood frozen, staring at my phone like it was a loaded weapon pointed at his future. The 60-second countdown had begun, though I wasn't actually timing it. Sometimes the threat of action is more powerful than action itself. What do you want me to do? He whispered. I want you to understand consequences. Dr. Hayes stepped forward, his medical training kicking in despite the crisis. Eddie, let's discuss this rationally. Preston made a mistake, yes, but destroying his career. I'm not destroying anything, Doctor. I'm simply withdrawing support that was given freely and can be revoked for cause. Sarah moved between us, her wedding dress rustling. Dad, please. I'm begging you. Sweetheart, this isn't about punishment. It's about character. Preston's character? Everyone's character, including mine. I looked around the circle of faces. Wedding guests who'd been enjoying an open bar and elegant dinner, now witnessing the collapse of everything they thought they understood about social hierarchy. For 4 years, I've watched Preston benefit from Margaret's sacrifice without knowing where it came from. Tonight, I learned what he really thinks of people like me. Preston found his voice. Eddie, I was drunk. I was nervous. The pressure from my family. Stop. I held up my hand. Don't blame alcohol. Don't blame pressure. Don't blame your family. You showed me exactly who you are when you think no one important is watching. I touched Marcus Thompson's number on my phone screen. The call connected immediately. Marcus, it's Eddie Johnson. Yes, I know it's evening. I'm calling about the Margaret Johnson Memorial Fund. The crowd leaned in, straining to hear both sides of the conversation. I need to invoke the character clause for recipient Preston Hayes, effective immediately. Even through the phone speaker, Marcus's surprise was audible. Eddie, that's a serious step. Can I ask what precipitated this decision? Public demonstration of behavior fundamentally inconsistent with the fund's values. I see. And you're certain about this course of action? I looked at Preston, who was shaking visibly. I am. Very well, I'll initiate the termination paperwork tonight. All future payments will cease and the recipient's loan deferments will end at midnight. Thank you, Marcus. Eddie, I'm sorry it came to this. Your wife would be proud of how you've honored her memory. I ended the call and put the phone back in my pocket. It's done. Preston collapsed into a nearby chair, his head in his hands. $340,000, due immediately, plus interest accruing daily. Dr. Hayes was frantically calculating. We can cover some of it, but that amount, Preston, your residency salary won't even touch the monthly payments. There won't be a residency, I said quietly. Everyone turned to stare at me. Janet, you handle hospital credentialing. What happens when a resident's educational funding is revoked for character issues? Janet looked uncomfortable but answered honestly. The hospital reviews the circumstances. If character is in question, they typically terminate the residency program participation. How long does that review take? Usually 48 hours. Preston's best man grabbed his arm. They can't just fire you over a loan issue. This isn't a loan issue, Janet corrected. This is a character assessment issue. Hospitals can't risk residents who demonstrate poor judgment or unprofessional behavior. I opened my briefcase again and pulled out a business card. Preston, this is Dr. Amanda Rodriguez's card. She's a financial counselor who specializes in medical education debt crisis. Preston took the card with trembling fingers. She helped another scholarship recipient navigate a similar situation 3 years ago. Another recipient? Student number 4 demonstrated similar character issues during his pediatric rotation. Spoke dismissively about patients' families based on their socioeconomic status. The crowd was silent, processing this revelation. What happened to him? Dr. Hayes asked. He found work in medical research, lower pay than clinical practice, but steady income. It took him 7 years to pay off his loans, but he managed. Preston looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. 7 years? If he lives very, very carefully. No country club memberships, no expensive cars, no $280 champagne. The irony of referencing the champagne currently drying in my hair wasn't lost on anyone. Sarah sat down heavily in a chair beside Preston. What does this mean for us? That depends on what kind of man you married, I said gently. Preston finally looked directly at me. Eddie, if there was some way to make this right, Preston, the scholarship is gone. That decision is final. But if I could prove I've learned from this... I studied his face, looking for genuine remorse rather than just panic about consequences. The Margaret Johnson Memorial Fund will continue to support other medical students who understand that compassion isn't conditional on social status. And me? You'll figure out how to be the doctor my wife thought you could become, just without her financial support. Dr. Hayes cleared his throat. Eddie, I want to apologize for my family's behavior tonight. Your apology isn't necessary, Doctor. Your son's choices are his own. I closed my briefcase and stood up, champagne finally done dripping from my suit. Sarah, sweetheart, I love you. That will never change, regardless of who you choose to build your life with. She stood and hugged me fiercely, her wedding dress staining with Dom Perignon residue. I love you too, Dad. I looked at Preston one final time. The man who comforted my dying wife is still in there somewhere. Find him. Then I walked toward the exit, leaving behind 200 silent wedding guests and one very expensive lesson about respect. The phone calls started before I even reached my car. Dr. Rodriguez, the financial counselor, called first. Eddie, I just heard from Marcus Thompson. Another scholarship revocation? Character clause violation. Same pattern as the pediatric resident? Worse, public humiliation of the benefactor. She sighed. I'll reach out to the family tomorrow. Emergency financial counseling session. They'll need it. Janet Miller called next. Eddie, I have to ask, are you certain about this decision? Preston's residency review is automatic now. I'm certain. The hospital board will want details. Tell them to call me Monday morning. I have documentation. This is going to create quite a stir in the medical community. Good. Maybe other scholarship recipients will think twice about their behavior. The third call came from someone unexpected. Dr. Martinez, the oncologist who'd treated Margaret. Eddie, I just heard through the hospital grapevine. Is it true you've been funding medical education scholarships? It is. In Margaret's name? Yes. She would be proud, but also heartbroken about tonight. She would have been disappointed in Preston's behavior, and proud of your response, measured but firm. By Sunday morning, the story had spread through social media. Someone at the wedding had recorded the scholarship revelation, and the video was trending on 3 platforms. Wedding groom humiliates father-in-law, discovers he's been paying his medical school bills, had been viewed 2.3 million times. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive. This is why you treat everyone with respect. Imagine pouring champagne on the man who funded your entire career. The quiet dignity of this father is everything. But there were also critics. Destroying someone's career over wedding drama seems excessive. Rich people games with poor people consequences. Both sides were wrong here. I didn't engage with any of it. Social media validation wasn't the point. Monday brought more serious consequences. Preston's residency was officially suspended pending investigation. The hospital's decision was swift and unambiguous. Character issues could not be overlooked in medical training. Dr. Hayes Sr. called that afternoon. Eddie, I need to ask, is there any possibility of reversing this decision? None. Preston is seeing a counselor. He's genuinely remorseful. I'm sure he is. $340,000 in debt tends to inspire reflection. He wants to apologize personally. I don't need his apology. Sarah does. That gave me pause. How is she handling this? Not well. She's staying with us temporarily. And Preston? Moved back into his childhood bedroom. He's applying for research positions, but his reputation has taken a hit. Reputations can be rebuilt. Can they? The story is everywhere, Eddie. Medical journals are writing about it. Ethics professors are using it as a case study. The case study angle hadn't occurred to me. Within a week, 3 medical schools had contacted me about speaking to their students about professional ethics and gratitude. The Margaret Johnson Memorial Scholarship incident became required reading in several medical ethics courses. More importantly, other scholarship recipients began reaching out. Students I'd helped without ever meeting them, wanting to express gratitude they'd never known they owed. Doctor. Lisa Chen, the fund's second recipient, called from her pediatric oncology fellowship. Mr. Johnson, I had no idea the scholarship came from someone who understood loss so personally. Your grades and character earned that scholarship, Doctor. But your wife's sacrifice made it possible. I just wanted you to know. I think about that every time I treat a child with cancer. That's exactly what Margaret would have wanted. The ripple effects continued expanding. City National Bank reported a 340% increase in Memorial Scholarship Fund inquiries. Apparently, my story had inspired other families to create similar programs. Preston, meanwhile, found work at a pharmaceutical research company. The pay was 60% less than his projected residency salary, but it was honest work. Dr. Rodriguez helped him negotiate a 15-year payment plan for his loans. Sarah filed for separation 6 weeks after the wedding. Not because of the financial consequences, but because of what those consequences had revealed about her husband's character. I can't stop thinking about that moment, she told me during one of our coffee meetings. The look on his face when he poured that champagne, that wasn't stress or alcohol, that was who he really is when he thinks he has power over someone. And now he's learning what it feels like to be powerless. Maybe that's not entirely a bad thing. 3 months later, Preston requested a meeting. Not to ask for reinstatement. He understood that door was permanently closed, but to share something he'd learned. The research lab where I work, we're developing treatments for pediatric cancers. I think about your wife every day, Eddie. About how she trusted me to care for her, and how I forgot what that meant. It wasn't redemption, but it was a beginning. 6 months after the wedding, I established new protocols for the Margaret Johnson Memorial Fund. Every scholarship recipient now receives a detailed history of the fund's origin. They know about Margaret's cancer battle. They know about the insurance money that could have secured a janitor's retirement, but instead secured their education. They know that their benefactor works night shifts and drives a Honda Civic and shops at Target. And they know that none of those facts make him worth less than anyone else. The character assessment process is now more rigorous. Recipients must complete annual community service requirements, working with underserved populations. They must demonstrate through actions rather than essays that they understand medicine as service rather than status. Most importantly, they must meet with previous scholarship recipients who've completed their training. Dr. Chen leads these meetings, sharing what she learned about gratitude and perspective. Sarah and I have dinner every Tuesday now. She's dating a high school teacher named Mike who treats servers with kindness and asks genuine questions about my work. When I told him about Margaret, he listened without trying to fix anything or offer empty platitudes. She sounds like she was an amazing woman, he said simply. She was. This scholarship program is a beautiful way to honor her. It's not just about honoring her anymore. It's about making sure future doctors understand where compassion comes from. Preston occasionally appears in the local medical community news. His research team has made promising progress on a pediatric cancer treatment. He's remarried, a social worker who specializes in helping families navigate medical crises. I don't know if he's found the compassionate Dr. Margaret believed he could become, but I hope he has. The wedding venue, Riverside Country Club, sent me a bill for champagne-stained marble. Apparently, Dom Perignon leaves marks that require professional restoration. I paid it without complaint. Some lessons are worth the cost. The most recent scholarship recipient is a young woman named Maria Santos, first in her family to attend college, working 2 jobs to support her education. When she met me to receive her award, she cried, "Mr. Johnson, why would you do this for a stranger?" Because my wife believed every patient deserves a doctor who remembers what struggle feels like. I'll never forget that. Make sure you don't. If you're watching this story, wherever you are in the world, remember, respect isn't earned through titles or bank accounts. It's given freely, or it's not respect at all. Subscribe if this resonated with you, and let me know where you're watching from. Because everyone deserves to be seen for who they really are.